where we bring stories from around the world to the citizens of the United Kingdom. Today we have a very special guest named Alan Turing.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It is a huge honor to have you here.
Please, Will, it's my pleasure. I've been waiting a long time to talk about my book.
For all the viewers around the world who may not know, this is Alan Turing, who is the author of his autobiography, The Wonderful Life of Alan Turing. Alan, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and tell the viewers who you are and what you've been up to, and then we'll get into some questions.
That's a great idea, Will. I'm super excited. So I suppose for those of you that don't know, I wrote the New York Times best-selling novel about my life and struggles and what I went through during my come-up. But I would love to talk about my book, so let's get into good stuff. What do you want to know first?
Let's start from the beginning. Where and when were you born, Alan?
I was born on June 23rd of 1912 in London, England. I absolutely loved my hometown, and it was a joy to be able to spend my life in the place that I grew up in that I love so much.
So how did you spend your days as a little Londoner?
Well, I mostly spent my days at school, but when I wasn't there, I was playing a variety of sports.
Variety of sports, huh? What do you mean by that?
I enjoyed things like running and rowing.
Alright, let's fast forward a couple of years. Where did you attend university?
That's actually a difficult question to answer, if I'm being honest, but I actually attended university at two different colleges. I studied mathematics at the University of Cambridge from 1931 up until 1934, and during my time there, I was actually elected into the King's College, where I furthered my studies for a short while. Then I went to Princeton in 1936 to get my PhD in mathematical logic. Ended up completing that endeavor in around 1938, and obtaining my PhD was a huge goal of mine, and I was positively ecstatic to receive it from the Princeton University. And you can read more about that in my chapter 5 of my novel, where I talk about my education journey.
Wow, Mr. Turing, that's a pretty impressive resume. So where did all that education lead you?
Life after receiving my PhD wasn't exactly simple. I took a part-time position with the government code and cipher school. Basically, that means as I worked for a British code breaking organization to help the British government decode messages for the enemy during World War II.
Breaking codes, huh? That must have been a pretty big deal. What exactly did you do to break those codes?
The words big deal might be a bit intense, if I must say, but to answer your question, I essentially built a machine called the bomb that broke the codes for the government. The machine that I built cracked around 84,000 messages each month, especially Enigma codes that were sent by German U-boats. So all my life I was interested in building machines and computing devices, and I was very fortunate that my hobbies correlated to my role in the war effort. I was also very fortunate to spend my time around other military men, because me and you both know I love military men.
Of course. Very interesting.
Yes.
It's quite brilliant too. How exactly did it work?
Well, the first step was for it to discover the daily key, which was the daily wheel order, wheel settings, and plug board configuration. It did these things by trying each possible rotor position and then applying a certain test to them. And after it discovered the daily key, it was able to work backwards to decipher the message. And it usually took between 2 to 4 hours. It was pretty quick. Now, I know these technological terms might be a bit too much and incomprehensible, but to describe the whole function of the bomb would just be too complex to explain on air.
That is fascinating, but you are right. None of it makes any sense to me, but maybe some of the intelligent viewers out there will understand.
Probably, yeah. I definitely understand where you're coming from.
Now, that machine is a pretty major accomplishment for someone so young. What did you accomplish in the next chapter of your life?
After the war, I worked at the National Physical Laboratory, where I designed the automatic computing engine.
That sounds impressive, but what exactly did this machine do?
It's essentially one of the first ever designs for a stored program computer, and the computer was able to solve any computing problem that could be described as being a sequence of mathematical steps. The technological part of my book goes into much more detail on this engine, and it's quite fascinating stuff. You can find it in chapters 13 and 14.
Fascinating indeed.
I also developed a procedure known as the Turing test. Humble, I know, but it formed the basis for artificial intelligence, so I couldn't not name it after myself. It's a pretty big deal. But the test determined whether a computer was able to think at an equivalent level or indistinguishable from a normal human.
Sounds absolutely brilliant. How on earth did that work?
The test involves a computer, a human subject, and an interrogator. And essentially what happens is the interrogator asks the computer questions that the other human subject is made aware of. And the computer's response, if it convinces the human subject that it is human too, then the computer passes the test. And you can read about that in chapter 15 of my book, titled The Imitation Game.
Outstanding. How do you come up with that sort of thing?
I don't know.
Well, Alan, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the air with me. You've taught all the viewers so much, and you're a brilliant man. Thank you so much for your contributions in the world.
The pleasure was mine, Will. I'm very fortunate at this opportunity to talk about myself and my book, and it was a great promotional thing for my team.
And once again, thank you all for tuning in to today's broadcast of BBC News, where we bring stories from around the world to citizens of the United Kingdom. Make sure to check out Mr. Turing's novel and autobiography, The Wonderful Life of Alan Turing. See you tomorrow.
Thank you for having me, Will.
My pleasure.